I am Becky Nova of Lady Landlords. A little bit about me is I am a native New Yorker. I am a cancer researcher by day and a real estate investor by night. I lived abroad for many years. I used to own a tour company in Spain. I then moved into Portugal where I used to own a bar, and I had a bus that took people from Spain over to Portugal and back the other way. So unfortunately, though, I made a really bad business decision in buying the bar in Portugal. So I ended up losing my company in Spain. I lost my business in Portugal. And I moved back to the United States back in 2013, pretty much penniless and homeless. I ended up having to move back into my parents' basement at 30 years old, which is not a good look for absolutely anybody. But I had at the time ended up meeting my now husband, and he is from the Dominican Republic. And when he immigrated to the United States, he very much came for that American dream, which always includes homeownership, right? And he wanted to make sure that he was going to have that white picket fence and all that type of thing. I, once again, was a traveler, had no intention of actually ever purchasing a home, but nevertheless, we ended up jumping into it. We ended up buying 10 doors in the past 2 years in high cost of living areas and competitive markets. We own both in New York, right outside New York City, and also in the Dominican Republic, which I am talking to you from as we speak. My husband and I are living in the Dominican Republic for a couple months now, so I hope you guys enjoy the view behind me. About a year ago, I started Lady Landlords, and as really a place just to be able to ask my own questions. I felt like I had all these questions about being a landlord and how to run my properties, and I really wasn't quite sure who to ask. And the group has absolutely grown. Within 1 year, Lady Landlords now has over 10,000 members. And we now have different events for networking, accountability groups, worksheets, courses, everything that you can ask. And that's actually going to be my free gift to you if you hang on through the rest of the course with me today. So what are we going to be talking about today? Why are we even investing in real estate, right? We have to kind of start from the beginning. Now, a couple of reasons that just come to mind that most of you are here for. I want you guys to write in the chat which reason is your number one reason for investing in real estate. Number one, my personal top reason is actually for cash flow. So if cash flow is something that interests you and that's why you're here learning about real estate, make sure to go put a 1 in the chat box below. If you are looking for that equity, that appreciation over time, saying, okay, this property is going to be my retirement fund, make sure to go and put number 2, that you're looking for equity and appreciation. And 3, if you're looking for all those amazing tax benefits that you get by owning property, put a number 3 in the chat box for me below. I see Deanna saying all those above. I see a lot of people saying financial freedom. Geeta, I'm so happy that you love the Lady Landlords group. I know that you've been in it for quite some time. Everybody's looking for all of these, right? So this is something that's incredibly important to us. And once again, after those 3, you guys have already alluded to the answer here. What is everybody looking for? Freedom. We are looking for that freedom of choice, the freedom of what we can do throughout our daily life. That, once again, that is why I'm down here living in the Dominican Republic. It was always my goal to move back abroad. So my husband and I are giving it a little bit of a test, and we are self-managing our properties from the Dominican Republic right now. So it's been a really great adventure. We actually just extended our trip down here in the DR for another 2 months. So we are really excited to see where that takes us next. But let me show you how you can get started. Now, first thing you want to be able to do is you want to make your goals for real estate. I see posts all the time in the Lady Landlords Facebook group and in other groups, people saying like, hey, I want to be a real estate investor. What do I do first? And it's like, cool, but you can't figure out like necessarily the direction you're going unless you know what you want to do. So this is what we're going to talk about today, and this is what I'm going to help you do. First thing you want to do is you want to make SMART goals. So everybody either grab your phone, you can do this in the chat box, a piece of paper and pen, whatever kind of works for you and however you learn there. Now, what I want you to do is think about what your goals are. You can think about these in your long-term goals, as in what do you want to see and get out of real estate over the next 5 years, or really if there's something particular that you're working on, this is something that's really going to help you get very clear into what your goals are looking for. So SMART is actually an acronym. So I'm going to take you guys through those different letters. The first thing you want to do with your goals is you want to make sure that they are incredibly specific, right? That's what the S stands for. And I'm going to give you a couple examples after this. So you want to take your goal and make sure you know exactly what it is. So you can't just say like, ooh, I want to buy a property. Okay, but what type of property? Are you going to buy a multifamily? Are you going to buy storage containers? Are you going to buy a multifamily? Do you want a commercial property? Do you want a mobile home? I don't know. This is for you to figure out, but you need to get very clear on what exactly it is. So be very specific in what you're looking for. You also want to make sure that it's measurable. You want to know what exactly you're trying to get to. And what I mean by that is a lot of people here were saying that they were looking for cash flow, financial freedom. Well, what do those numbers mean to you? You need to put a number onto it. If you have cash flow and you're bringing in an extra, let's say $200 a month from a rental property, well, is that going to help you be able to retire from your full-time job? Probably not. 200 is not going to be enough for most people. But what number will be? Maybe then you're going to say, I need to be able to get to my measurable numbers and $5,000 a month in income and cash flow from my rental property to be able to leave my full-time job, right? So you see how that's specific, but also that's measurable. You have that tangible number there that you're going to need. A stands for attainable. This means like, is it possible within like the world of things? And what I mean by that is we can't be going and saying, hey, I want to buy 5 commercial properties of at least 100 units by tomorrow. That's just not going to happen in the world of things. No matter who you are, no matter how much money you have, that's not going to happen. You're not going to buy the first multifamily on Mars. These are things that are not going to happen. So make sure that you're setting things that can actually happen within the world of things, right? So when you're thinking about a property, if it's going to take 60 to 90 days to close, well, you can't say, I want to close by February 1st, right? Make sure that it's the way that it works in the world. Realistic is realistic for you. For you personally, is this something you can accomplish? So same thing, using that same example of looking to buy a property and you want to close now in 3 months. But if you don't have the down payment saved, if you're not ready to start looking, if things with your family and home life are kind of a little bit crazy now, living in the middle of a pandemic, maybe this isn't the time to kind of go house shopping or change your kids' schools, whatever it may be for you. So realistic is really making sure that for you, this is something that's possible. We don't want to set goals that we know we can't reach. The idea of setting a goal is something that you can actually attain. The last letter in the acronym is T. That stands for time bound. Time bound means, when is this going to happen? You can't just say like, ooh, I'm going to buy a property. Okay, but when? Are you going to buy a property in 2021? Are you going to buy a property in 2022? First quarter, second quarter? When is that going to be? Because in that way, that's going to be your hedge mark that you're time. So that's how you're going to know that you were able to get to your actual goal. And like I said, you could do this in either long-term or smaller goals. So I want you guys to think now, what is the first goal you'll be working on? If anybody feels comfortable to do this, please share your goal down in the chat box. I want to see what you all are working on. But my example here, and you could see where I highlighted in orange what the different factors are, which makes this a SMART goal. For example, I will buy a cash flowing 2 to 4 unit multifamily rental for under $750,000 with an hour of my current home in New York within the next 6 months. So you see how it's very clear. I'm not looking for a single family, right? You know exactly what I'm looking for. I'm looking for that 2 to 4 unit multifamily. I have what my price is. I know it's going to be under 750K. It's going to be within an hour of my current home in New York. And then it's going to be within the next 6 months. So that's where it's time bound here. This is something that I can absolutely do. It's attainable. It's realistic. It's possible. That's a goal that I can do. And this, so you know, was actually the goal that I had set last year when I bought my COVID property, which I'll talk about probably a little bit more in this presentation. So Stacy, I see you wrote your goal there. Thank you very much for sharing that yours is to buy that 1 storage facility a month this year. And see what Stacy did there. She made sure to quantify it. She's saying 1. And in what time period is that going to be? It's going to be every month, and there's going to be 1 for the entire year. So we know she's going to have 12 by the end of the year. So Stacy, that's perfect. If anybody wants to share their goals, feel free to go write it in the chat and we can kind of look it over. Or if you have questions, feel free to put that down there. So now that we have our goal, oops, did I skip one? All right. Now let's also then think long-term. I just gave you that short term. That's what I was looking for in a property. But you also want to then see what's going to happen in the next 5 years. So for example, a lot of us are looking for financial freedom, right? That's what a lot of you wrote, financial freedom, cash flow. So my example here, once again, highlighting in orange, is I will generate a $5,000 a month net rental income in the next 5 years through a portfolio of small multifamily properties within an hour of my home. Very clear what I'm looking to do. It has those numbers and I'll know exactly when I accomplish it. When I get to that 5-year mark, if I now have that $5,000 coming in, there we go. We know that I hit my goal. Remember to also be easy on yourself. Sometimes goals can change, life changes, and it's okay to update these goals. But remember to use that long-term goal to set that picture of what you're really looking to get to in the future. Now, we have our goal, but now we have to pick that strategy that's going to match what that goal actually looks like. So there are a bunch of different strategies that we can talk about. The four that we're going to focus on today is one, flips, rentals, wholesaling, and syndication. So everybody out there, just shoot down which number, one, two, three, or four, that is what your focus is or what you hope to be focusing on, or maybe what you are currently focusing on. But let me know who I'm speaking to out there. Let me know. So Candace is saying she's both working on flips and rentals. I see Linda's also flips and rentals. Okay, I see we have a couple people, most people are in that one and twos. Stacy's working on four. Tiffany's 2 and 4 in rentals and syndications. Perfect. So we have a good mix here. So what we need to do is we're going to go through each of these different strategies and talk about the pros and cons to them. And the reason we want to do that is because we want to make sure that these are going to fit with that goal that you just picked and set up. So let's talk about flips quickly. Flips are when you buy a property at a low price, renovate, sell it for a higher price, and you want to try to do that in the shortest period of time. So the good parts about that is that usually with a flip, you can end up having a large lump sum of cash at the end of it. You can also design that space any way that you want it, right? If you're renovating it, you can make it look the way you want. You don't have to deal or purchase somebody else's problem. It's also a time limited project, which means you can go and work on something else. And you can usually get a good deal on the price because you know that there's going to have to be a lot of work to be done and you're not afraid of doing that work. The negative side of that, though, is that you're going to have some type of construction knowledge, and you're going to have a trustworthy general contractor, somebody that you can work with and feel comfortable with. This is usually going to be more expensive and take a little bit longer than originally planned. Anybody that's ever done anything with construction, you probably know that your timeline always ends up being pushed out a little bit more. And
sorry, Becky, you accidentally got muted. Try it again, sorry.
I should be good now, right?
Yeah. Perfect, you're good.
Okay. So what I was saying is that anybody that's ever done a renovation or any type of flip, you've probably noticed that at some point it takes a little bit longer than you expected, and it usually goes over budget. So you want to make sure to have those things thought about at the beginning. You also have carrying costs, which means that you must pay for the property to really sit there and be empty during that renovation time. So you have to pay taxes, possibly utilities, those types of things. And also you don't get paid until you find a buyer. Now, when we talk about rentals, this is AKA, we also call it that buy and hold. There are a bunch of different ways that you can work with rentals. One, you can work with these as apartments, you can buy single family properties, multifamily properties, and also commercial or mixed use space that is a combination of both residential and commercial. Now, the pros to this is a lot of people tend to get into as an entry point into real estate investing as what's called house hacking. So that way they can use a lower down payment. In case you're not familiar with house hacking is a fantastic strategy. This is actually how I got started. It's where you live in a multifamily and you live in one unit and you rent out the other units. That not only helps bring in extra income that'll help go towards your mortgage every month, but it'll also open up your opportunities for different mortgages where then you could put down a lower down payment. For investment properties that you're not going to live in, you have to put down 20, 25% most times to be able to purchase that property. But with an owner occupied property where you're going to be living in it, you can actually get a mortgage where you only have to do a 3.5% or even a 5% down payment. Huge difference there that can save you a lot of money and really get a lot of people into the game of real estate. If you own a single family house, you can also do this and rent out other rooms within your own home to be able to lower your monthly mortgage payments. You also, with rentals, you're going to have that regular influx of cash. You also have an increase in equity at the same time. So over time, your property is just becoming more valuable in addition to you getting that monthly payment. Really, really nice kind of win-win there. The negative sides of this, though, is you have to manage your property. So if you self-manage, this is something you're going to need time for. If you're going to hire a property manager, this is something you're going to need money for. So definitely things to consider when seeing if this is going to fit with the goal of what you're trying to work towards. You also have maintenance and capital expenditure costs. So your maintenance are more of your smaller items, fixing clogged drains, changing light bulbs, that type of stuff. depending on how you manage your property. And also capital expenditures are your larger upgrades. Once again, you're not going to need to do a new roof every couple of months. That's more something every couple decades. You're also going to have to consider vacancy rates and also bad tenants. And I know that this is a very big topic right now with a lot of the CDC moratoriums on evictions. So this is something that is really kind of pushing people a little bit away from rentals. So if you're a person that's saying, hey, I live in a state that's not very landlord friendly, like some of us in New York, I'm sure I'm not the only one on this call from New York, but if that's something that kind of is worrying you, rentals is not the way that you're going to want to go. That doesn't fit what your goals are, because you're going to be afraid that you're going to end up with tenants that aren't going to end up paying and be stuck with them for probably years before you can actually evict them. So if that's something that's a major concern of yours, then rentals aren't the way to go. But once again, don't worry, there's plenty of other strategies that can work with. Now, when we talk about rentals, we can talk about them in two different types: long-term rentals and your short-term rentals. Long-term rentals, the bonuses of that is you have that consistent cash flow. You know those people are going to be there. The idea is that they're paying on a monthly basis and you have that money coming in. The goal is always to have that low turnover. When you find great tenants, you want to keep them there and you want to make sure that then you just have that money coming in on a monthly basis. Now, with rentals, usually the first couple of months that anybody kind of moves in, they kind of got to get settled. They have to know the lay of the land. They have to understand kind of like how the house functions and just certain things that they're going to have to get used to. But really, after that initial move-in period, they're relatively on autopilot. But as we talked about on the last slide, if you get a bad tenant, you are stuck with that bad tenant. Now, when we come to short-term rentals, we have some different types of benefits. Here, you have a potential for a lot of money in a short period of time. And you might only need to rent your property for a few months to be able to make a good income for the entire year. For example, beach houses, like the one I'm in here. There are not people that are going to be coming here at other times of the year. There are clearly certain months that's going to be high season, that's going to be ideal for people to be renting. And then really the house could sit kind of empty for the next couple months because you already made your income for the year. The negative side, though, is that you constantly need to be looking for new renters, and you need to have people making bookings at all times. You also need to be able to get a cleaning crew in or do it yourself and fix the house with really quick turnover, so that way you can have the next people move in. Also, you have a lot less control over renters. You are not picking these people. These people are now picking your property, and you are stuck with whoever it is that happens to swipe their credit card and pay for that Airbnb. Now, let's move on to wholesaling. Wholesaling in the most basic terms is when you get a contract from a motivated seller at a low price, and then you find a buyer at a higher price. And then you get to keep that difference between what you picked up the contract for to what you assigned it to a buyer for. Now, one of the best benefits and one of the main reasons that people do start within wholesaling is because you don't really need cash to start this up. This is really something that you can it's a great way for people to be able to build the capital that they need to then move into one of the other strategies. The negative side of this, though, is you have to be really good at networking. You have to have that really strong list of cash buyers, so that way when you get that contract, that you know exactly who you can go to be able to sell that property to. So that's something that you really need to be good at hustling. Now, when it comes to flips, rentals, and wholesaling, you have to be able to identify your market. When you're identifying your market, you have two different options. You can do short distance, which means something close to your current home, or you can also go long distance. So when we talk about short distance, this allows for a lot easier oversight. You know exactly what's going on in your property. You can check in on it whenever you need to. It's there. You can make it there. There's also a better chance that you're going to know the area. So you know if you're buying in a nice neighborhood or a bad neighborhood or a desired school district or not. You're also going to have those easier networking connections, meaning that if you have all of a sudden a water issue in the middle of the night, then you're going to know the exact plumber that you want to reach out to get them over there to fix that issue. The negative side of that, though, is it might be an expensive area. I'm not currently, but I live in New York. Whenever I go to buy purchase a property, that's something that is going to be more expensive than a lot of the other states. Also, you might be in a very competitive market. San Francisco, New York, usually the coasts tend to have a little bit more of these problems. But even now in the middle of the country, especially with changes from COVID, we're seeing competitive areas pick up in areas that we've never really seen before. So if that's an area, if that's kind of your concern, is it's too expensive and too competitive where I currently am, you might want to think about long distance. Now, long distance means then that you could buy in a cheaper market, and you can also find maybe a more desirable area, right? Maybe where you are and you want to do a short-term rental, maybe it doesn't work because you don't live in a place that's touristy or beachy that people want to stay in. So now you can go and you can pick a different area that will work better for you. The negative side of this, though, is that you're not going to really know the day to day. You're not going to really know the area, and you're not really going to be able to kind of follow and just kind of shoot over there on your lunch break to go check on something. If you decide to use a property manager, you're clearly going to need to analyze that cost of that property manager when you are first looking into the deal. And you're probably also going to need, especially if you don't go the property manager route and you self-manage from abroad or from a different state, you're going to need to find some people that are going to be your trustworthy boots on the ground, a person that you can call in case of an emergency to make sure that you can kind of go check. So if you don't know the area or anybody in that specific area, that really might be a struggle for you. And maybe that's not something you're comfortable doing. Now, syndication, I always like to almost compare to wholesaling and kind of show them as a different light. If you are a person that has time but does not really have money, wholesaling might be a good fit for you. On the other side, if you're a person that has money but doesn't necessarily have time, syndication might be the strategy that works for you. Syndication is being, in most senses, a passive member of a group that owns a large property, or you can start your own syndication. Pro syndication is, in my opinion, this is probably the closest you can get to passive income within real estate, right? Rentals you have to manage, flips you're going to have to manage. Syndication is, unless you are the main partner within that, you really are not doing too much, where you really kind of have some passive income coming in. The negative side of this is that usually when there is a lower risk, there happens to be less of a reward. So you might not get the same ROI that you would in some of the other strategies that we talked about. Also, you really don't have much control over a syndication. This is where you probably will never even set foot or ever see the property that you own a portion of. So you need to make sure that that's something that you're comfortable with. I happen to be a little bit of a control freak. This would be a little bit difficult for me, and therefore probably would not be in a goal that would fit well as a strategy for me. So you want to make sure to focus on your goal and the strategy that you picked, but always keep your options open. So I kind of always tell people that they should keep their eyes closed in real estate, but their ears open, because you want to make sure to stay focused on what it is that's going to work for you specifically, because every single person in this room right now, something might work for you, but it's not going to work for you. Everybody has different goals, and you need to make sure that your strategy is going to fit with that goal that you have. But always keep your ears open, because you don't know where your next opportunity is going to come from. Step number 3 is start shopping. This is my favorite part, because there's nothing better, in my opinion, than getting to go out and look at all of the possibilities of what you can do and the opportunities that you have. So you want to make sure, once again, that your goal is matching the strategy that you picked. And if not, make a change. It is okay if things change in your life. If at one point you're working on flips and that's the most important thing for you, but then all of a sudden your lifestyle kind of changes and you don't want to be working with construction crews and managing those types of things, it's okay to say, you know what, based on what I'm doing in my life, I want to go live on a beach. I'm going to switch to doing some syndications. Those are okay. So make sure you stay tuned in with what you're trying to get out of life, and that you update your strategy along the way. So in summary, today we talked about goal setting and identifying your strategy. You identified your why that you were included in this. We talked about how to create your SMART goals, and you weighed out the strengths and the cons to the various strategies. You were then able to narrow down the right strategy to match your goal, allowing you to have the knowledge to move confidently forward. If you would like to continue the conversation with me, feel free to find our Facebook group at Lady Landlords, or you can check me out on Instagram or Clubhouse at BeckyNova24. And my offer to you today, as I mentioned earlier, is I'm offering everybody a free financial cheat sheet. So this is from the beginner that has no property to the person that has 100 properties and is still looking for more. If you are looking to learn how to finance your next deal, traditional finance, or even do some creative financing, head over. I just put the link down in the chat to how you can get the Lady Landlord free financial cheat sheet. So I'm sure that'll help a lot of you out there listening today. And once again, thank you very much for listening in and having me here to chat with everybody. If you have any questions, I will stop my share now, and let's kind of talk about what some people's goals are and how that fits with your strategy.
Awesome. This is a good start too, because it's a good overview of kind of, what everybody should be focusing on. So that's
I will say that I picked this time slot because I wanted to make sure to be able to give this talk a little bit earlier in the 3 days of summit information, exactly for that reason, Stacey. So you're completely right. Um, I wanted to make sure that as you're listening to all of the other speakers and talk through the other strategies, that you really made sure to make sure that you yourself are going in the right direction. I feel like I see it all the time, that people hear what somebody else is doing, or get mentioned that something else is working for somebody, and then everybody kind of like a herd of cats just like runs over and changes their strategy. I'll tell you a quick story. In one of the Facebook groups that I was in, someone had wrote a post about how, they had just closed on like 4 property that week, and we're saying like, oh, everybody should want to do this, and all these people in the group are like, yes, that's what I want to do, 4 properties in a week, that's amazing. And I was like, I don't want to do that. I got so attacked. You have no idea. And I had to really explain to people, like, my goal is not to own all of the real estate. I don't want to own that many properties. My goal personally is to own the least amount of properties for the most amount of money. I don't want to buy 4 houses in a week. That sounds like a disaster for me personally. For you, for somebody else, that might be great. But you need to know what's right for you, and don't go chasing everybody else and what they're doing. Focus, know what you want, and go after it.
I call it ultimate clarity with my goals. Like,
Yeah.
the more specific you are with your goals, the better you're going to be able to manifest them.
Yeah.
Right. The more specific you are, the better you're gonna be able to manifest them. So I totally get the whole goals thing, because I'm a big goals person. And also I wanted to say too, I love that when you're doing your presentation, I can hear the birds chirping in the background. That's just awesome.
It was a little ironic that the way that the time of the summit, because we've been talking about this for months, Stacey, and I just
Yeah.
couldn't believe that this was actually when it fell. And I was like, you know what? This is going to be the absolute best. This was my ultimate goal. My ultimate long-term goal was to be able to live on a beach and to be able to really be location independent. And I just was like, how fortuitous is it that this is where I'm going to get to do this talk, and where I get to present from is really kind of saying like, this is where I'm going to be. So my husband is a little more risk adverse than I am. I am really always the one that's like pushing, let's figure out the next thing, let's build something. And he's always the one that's like, how are we going to pay for it? How's that going to affect our taxes? Where's our medical care coming from? And I'm like, stop with your stupid questions, right? But you kind of need both sides of the coin there, I guess. So he agreed to allow me just 1 month to be able to live in this beautiful setting, to see how it would go managing our properties. And just said 1 month, it'll be a test. Let's see how it goes. And it has gone so well with some of the systems that we were able to put in place before we left. We actually extended our trip and are staying here till April.
I love that. And and what's awesome is that, you're doing a Zoom webinar right now, and it looks like you have a virtual background, but actually the truth is your background is real. Don't you want to have a background like that and not have to put like a fake one up in Zoom? You know what I'm saying?
I had a call with somebody, and same thing. I had this background, and I'm sitting here, and you can see my hair is all curly and messy, and I'm clearly wearing a tank top. And someone was like, Becky, like, that's a little bit much for the fake background. Like, come on, you had to actually put on a tank top to make it look like your fake background was real. Like, come on, girl. And I was like, no, like, this is real. I mean, and this person, like, they were just so confused. They were like, Becky, like, you're a little over the top here and trying to like make this stick. And I was like, no, like, this is actually where I am.
You can actually do this. This is actually possible.
Yeah. And I want to show everybody that it is. If that's what your goal is, go get it.
Now, there's a lot of people that probably have a lot of questions and stuff, but I want to say awesome presentation. Very good start, I think, to a morning. So anybody that has any questions, just put yourself on camera and ask a question. Unmute yourself.
Yeah.
No questions?
Yeah, hi, I have a question.
Okay, go ahead.
Thanks, Becky. Great presentation. This is Linda Jordan. So when you're buying out your properties, how are you getting them refinanced for rentals?
Say that again?
Your rentals that you purchase, do you ever have to refinance them? And if so, are you using traditional loans or banks, or how does that work?
Gotcha. So all the properties that I've bought, I have used traditional financing for. I've been able to get mortgages for all of them. And that's how my plan has worked. At a point, yes, part of my strategy is to be able to refinance and then take that money, do a cash out refinance, take out the equity that I have in that property, and then be able to buy another property or possibly upgrade the multifamilies that I have and buy something with either bigger cash flow or a larger building. I have not had to do that. You have to remember too, my first property I bought in May 2018. So that means there's not a lot of equity in those properties right now. So I can't do a cash out refinance at this time because there's not enough money. There's not enough money on, skin on the bone here. There's nothing there for me to be able to take back out to be able to purchase into another property. So until I'm able to do that, and trust me, I checked in with my mortgage broker yesterday, and I was like, hey, here are my numbers. Can I do anything with this yet? And he goes, no, you can't. And I said, okay, great. I'll talk to you in a few months then. And I talked to him about my other deals and other ways to move forward. But that's one of the reasons that I'm continuing to use traditional mortgages for this moment in time, just because I don't have anything in that cash out refinance to be able to do. When you refinance, remember that it's basically going through the whole mortgage process again, for those of you that haven't done it yet. So when you go and now you have that whole new mortgage, that whole new contract, which is really what a mortgage is, you have to pay your closing costs again. Now that's going to suck, especially in New York where properties are expensive. That means closing fees are expensive. So what I look for in doing a refinance, and what I'm going to wait until I can get to, is what I call a trifecta. There are 3 things that I want to have happen when I refinance to be able to save me money and be able to maximize using that refinance. So first one, when I refinance, I want to be able to lower my interest rate, right? Clearly, we all would like to be able to do that. Interest rates, as we all know right now, are lower than they probably are ever going to be again in our lifetime. So that's something I want to be able to take advantage of. But for right now, I'm going to wait till I can do that. So I need to lower my interest rate. Number 2 is some of the properties I do have mortgage insurance on. So for those of you that are not familiar with that, what that means is if you do not put your 20% down when you buy a property, you have to pay an extra fee, which is called mortgage insurance or private mortgage insurance. So if you've ever heard the terms MI or PMI, that's what that stands for. It's an extra monthly fee that you have to pay since you didn't put 20% down. At a certain point, depending on the mortgage that you have, you can get that mortgage insurance removed. So I want to make sure when I refinance that I can also get that mortgage insurance removed as well. That's going to increase my cash flow on my properties almost an extra $700 once I can get the mortgage insurance removed on the mortgages that I do have. That right there, an extra $700 bucks. Do you know what? Think of all the things you could do with $700. That's just by getting that removed. So then the third thing that I want to be able to do when I do this all-in-one cash out refinance is I want to make sure to also get that cash out. And I want to make sure that that's enough to actually do something with. I'm not looking to take out, I buy in New York, 20 grand is not probably going to help me so much. I'm probably going to need a little bit more than that. And also for me to pay the closing costs for that, I need to make sure that there's a substantial amount of money that I can actually use to purchase another property. So I'm not going to go and rush to refinance until, since my properties are buy and holds, until I can do those 3 things. We'll see when that happens. COVID clearly put a little bit of a delay on some of those plans, but that's perfectly fine because I can still continue to buy properties through traditional mortgaging, or when you guys check out that financial cheat sheet that I just sent to you, also in there, it's going to tell you a bunch of other ways to use creative financing. And when I say that, I mean, I'm talking your private lenders, your hard money lenders. I have all those relationships ready to go, but I just have not needed to use them yet for my strategy personally. Does that help, Linda?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Okay, I give you a little bit more than you were bargaining for in your question, so I hope that helped the larger group. Anybody else have a question? You can either write it in the chat or unmute yourself and let me know.
Unmute yourself if you want a question. Okay, but Debbie says is a traditional mortgage in your personal name.
So my strategy is to buy in my name. And I buy my personal name because that gives you the availability to have that owner occupied bonus and have that lower down payment. And you can also, you get lower interest rates if you're buying in your name. When you buy a mortgage in your LLC, if you do that first, you automatically are an investment property, right? An LLC is an entity. It's a legal entity that just exists on paper. You can't have an owner occupied property because a corporation doesn't have a butt. They don't need to sit somewhere. They don't need to sleep somewhere. So if you purchase in the LLC's name, it's automatically an investment property. Before COVID, you could probably find someone that would do a mortgage for you at that 10 to 15% if you're buying in your personal name. Now, even as in your personal name for an investment property, you're really looking at 20, 25% down. So now if I buy in an LLC, there's no way I'm getting away for anything less than 25 or 30%. Also, once again, your interest rates. So what I personally do, I buy things in my personal name, but I always make sure my LLC. This is not something that you can do. Not every single mortgage company does this. So you're not able to transfer that over. So make sure if that's your plan is to transfer your mortgage over to your LLC and the deed into your LLC to own the property there. You want to make sure before you sign that dotted line on that mortgage, make sure that your mortgage actually allows you to be able to do that, because not all mortgages do.
So you have you have covered with snow. Oh my God. And so you had no idea how long it was running for?
Hang on, let me figure out.
I don't think that was for me.
Wait, hang on.
Oh my
that's
God.
okay. She must have automatically unmuted herself. Also,
No, and I was like, I don't know how to answer that. So, okay, so I'm so glad that wasn't for me, because I don't know what I would have said.
you could have totally told that. You could have totally told that's Linda. She's a New Yorker. She's like, oh my God, are you serious?
Absolutely agreed. Okay.
Becky, this is
Yeah, there's a
Lori.
couple other questions. Just
Hold on.
unmute yourself. Go ahead.
Oh,
Hey,
wait, hold on.
Becky, this is
Hold on. I'm going to answer the one in the chat first.
okay.
So because Shari actually wrote a follow-up question, so I just want to make sure to finish answering hers, and then we'll get back to the questions from people in the group, and unmute yourself. So 1 second for that. So Shari was saying, so you wait till you transfer the property and before you buy another one. No, once I get past that closing date, that's when then I'll transfer the deed of my property. That will happen right after I close. I don't wait to buy the next one. But like I said, the main key with that is that you have to make sure that your mortgage allows you to transfer that deed into an LLC. If not, you can be creating bigger problems. So that's definitely a conversation to have with your mortgage broker and also your lawyer. So Shari, I hope that helps. One more question in the chat, and then we'll go back to the people on video. The question is, can you owner occupy more than one property? So you can buy more than one. You can, if you move, now you are owner occupying, right? So what I actually did, I lived in one place with an owner occupied loan where I only had to put down 5%. I started with a conventional loan. Then you have to live there for at least a year or whatever your mortgage agrees to. Usually it's a year. And that, unless you're using like a VA loan, then you have to live there longer. But a conventional loan, an FHA loan, if you live there for a year, after that year is up, you can actually move and get another owner occupied mortgage. There are conditions to it. You can't just move across the street. You can't move to a bigger house that, around the neighborhood. You have to usually move. It has to be at least 50 miles away from where you're living. So that's saying, hey, I have to move for a job, a family thing, whatever that might be. But you have to have a reason for it. If it's within that 50 miles, you really have to justify why it is that you need another property. So that's something to definitely run ideas and talk through that with your mortgage broker to see if you're allowed to do that. But you absolutely can use owner occupied mortgages more than once. Once again, if my husband was not so risk adverse, I would move every 365 days and just buy another owner occupied property. I would go live in all the different states. He's probably not gonna let me do that, but that's what I would do. All right, Linda or Lori, I think you guys had a question.
Oh yeah, I did. Well, thank you so much. This is Lori. Great information. I'm so grateful, so appreciate it. Yeah, so guess what? You just answered my question. So
okay.
So thank you so much.
Oh, you're welcome. Oh, good. I'm glad that we got that settled. Perfect.
Yes. Okay.
Linda, what's your question? Oh, I think Linda is still there.
Linda,
Linda's
I
on
just
mute.
unmuted you. Do you have a question? I'm asking you.
Yes.
There you go.
Yes, I do. Thank you so much. Hi, Becky. Thank you for the webinar today. It was very question because I live in a big city. I live in Chicago and you're in New York. So obviously two big poles that are very tenant friendly. And I know you touched a little bit on that, but how do you deal with it? Like, what are your best tips to qualify renters properly? Or maybe, I don't know if you invest a lot out of state or at least outside of the city, but how do you go around that without having to go too far?
How do I go around, like, how do I qualify tenants, or how do I find the place I should buy?
Well, both actually, because also in terms of pricing, obviously it's completely different prices. And how do you like increase equity as much as you can and cash flow as much as you can while still being in big cities and where mortgages are obviously high and prices are obviously high at the purchase.
Yeah. No, being in Chicago, I totally get it. Okay, so I'll do tenants first, and then we'll talk about how to pick long distance. So tenants, just so you guys know, I have a video that literally walks you through my entire tenant screening process. If you go on YouTube and look up Live Free with Becky Nova, let me type it in the chat here for you guys. Live Free with, I have a full video there that walks you through the exact steps of what you need to do on YouTube to make sure that you're picking the best qualified tenants. In a quick snapshot though, oh, and also YouTube for all the men that are watching, you guys are all allowed to join the YouTube channel, but unfortunately I can't let you into Lady Landlords. Lady Landlords, ladies only. But in basically my process for picking tenants is I always make sure to have an ad that is incredibly clear, good pictures. I write out all the information about not only the property, also the area, and also my qualifications. When you do that, anybody that's ever used Facebook Marketplace to rent a place knows that the first thing you're going to get 2 seconds after you post that ad is people being like, hey, so is this still available? And you're gonna be like, oh, of course it's available. I just posted this 2 minutes ago. So as much as those people are going to send me a canned response, I send them back an automatic message that says, yes, it is available. Here's a link to a pre-screening questionnaire. Please complete, and I will contact you if you still qualify. So that way that weeds out anybody that one, puts it in their court that they now have to actually fill out that pre-screening questionnaire. They're the one that wants a home. I'm not doing the work for them. So they have to go and actually fill out the pre-screening questionnaire. Then when they fill out the pre-screening questionnaire, I only contact then the people that actually passed the screening questionnaire. My screening questionnaire is a Google form. Like I said, you can find more on my tenant screening video at Live Free with Becky Nova. But basically my pre-screening questionnaire just goes through and asks the questions about pre-qualifications. So it'll go through and be like, well, how much, what's your salary? Who's moving in? Do you have any pets, especially if I have a property that does not allow pets? So I make sure that people actually read the ad in my pre-screening questionnaire. Then I always schedule an open house. Or now with COVID, kind of people back to back. So that way I can view the property with the most amount of people in the least amount of time. And then I go through the application process there. And I think as a reminder, one thing that I hear a lot of landlords don't do that I definitely encourage everyone to do is get your references and call them. Call their friends, call their boss, call their coworker, whoever it may be. But when you do that, and call their previous landlord. And when you do that, you always have to make sure to ask questions that will verify who they are, right? So that way it's not like someone just put their mom down as a reference and really called it their boss. So one of the questions you would ask would be like, when did this person start working there? How much did they pay in rent while they lived in your property? Questions that like your friends aren't going to know what you pay in rent, but your landlord's going to. So just make sure to verify those questions. But like I said, just for the interest of time, check out the best screening tips video on Live Free with Becky Nova on YouTube. Okay. Now for the second part of your question, Linda, when you're talking about kind of that long distance investing, my recommendation for people is always to think about a place. If you're not going to buy where you are, right? You're saying Chicago, totally get it. Expensive market, competitive market, not a lot of places, it can be a little more difficult to find like a cash flowing kind of property. If you are going to go long distance, I recommend you pick a place that you've at least been to maybe once, or that somebody else that lives there. They don't have to be your best friend. It doesn't have to be where your mom lives, but maybe that friend in college that you kind of talk to once a year, or that friend from high school you see at the reunion, that type of thing. The reason you want to do that is that way you at least have some type of contact of a personal relationship of something that you can get some answers to. So that way you can call up that friend and say, hey, I'm actually looking to buy in your town in Texas or wherever it may be. And I have a couple questions. What school zones are kind of popular? What areas should I avoid? At least you can ask those questions. So that at least kind of narrows down, because when you now say, well, I don't want to buy in Chicago, I want to buy somewhere else. Well, cool, somewhere else can be anywhere, right? So how are you going to narrow that down? Think about a place that maybe you would like to live in the future. So that way you buy a property, and then when you want to retire there in 30 years, you have a paid off property, right? So maybe you buy in a place that you plan on living in the future, or you buy in a place where you at least know somebody there. So that way, if you have to go visit or there's an emergency and you need to send somebody out there, you can make that phone call, not for every little thing, not saying that they're going to manage it, but at least you can call and say like, hey, there's this huge problem. Can you please just this one time run over to that property? And also you can get referrals for plumbers, electricians, that type of thing. Also, not only if you have that one person there, or if maybe there's just a place you heard about that sounds great and you know nobody there, my recommendation is always to go on Facebook and join like local moms and dads groups and ask questions there. That is a great place. Remember that now you're talking strangers and you're talking to strangers on the internet. So it's a little more difficult than, talking to that college friend of yours, but at least you'll have that. You can ask there about what school zones are really popular, or, hey, what's the electrician that everybody's using here? Who's a contractor that's really trustworthy? It'll give you a little insight to that neighborhood as well and kind of what it's like and that type of idea. So that I would use as a backup, but I would usually start with a place that you like, that you've been to at least once, or where you at least know one person that lives there. Does that help, Linda? I unmuted you.
Yes, it does. Thank you so much. And thank you for the thorough answer. I'm definitely going to check out your YouTube. Thank you.
All right. You're welcome. And shoot me any questions if you have, okay?
Yeah, so I just so you know, I muted everybody so they don't automatically unmute themselves. So you as the co-host, anybody co-host, y'all can just unmute anybody, okay? Just so you know.
Gotcha.
No, we don't have people just like, start yelling at each other and stuff. Okay, good questions. Who else has a question?
Paul, I see someone raising their hand. I'm going to answer Paul's question in the chat first, and then I'm going to go to Nori, whose name I hope I pronounced correctly. So Nori, you're up next. Paul was asking what type of LLC do you suggest for your rentals? Paul, can you please be a little more clear on what you mean for what type of LLC? I need a little more clarity on that. So answer that, and then I'm going to go to Nori, unless you want to mute yourself, Paul. Or I guess we'd have to do that. All right, Nori, you're up. I'm unmuting you now. Ooh. All right, go for it.
Oh, for Paul or for me?
For you, Nori.
Okay, hi.
Hi.
It's actually Nore, but it's totally fine.
Oh, Nori. Thank you.
Yeah, pardon me. I'm still getting ready and heading to the city now. I live in Atlanta, and I am a landlord and getting ready to do my very first flip, though. So I'm now kind of familiar with some of the things you were talking about, because I'm having to do a cash out refi on one of the properties in order to have the cash on hand for the flip. But I guess my question is, I love that you're also involved in short-term rentals. Me too. But that's actually an interesting point that you bring up, the fact that you can buy it in your own name and get a much lower interest rate. So my question is, I'd like to build like a multi-family. It's going to be for short-term rental right across the street from a place where I already have a short-term rental.
Okay.
And it's just kind of expanding in that way. And I guess my question is, can I get approved based on the potential income of the house rather than my own personal, like get the mortgage in my own name, like a personal mortgage, but get approved based on the potential income of the house?
Of the one, yes, you can. So you're talking about the potential income of the house that you would be buying.
Yes. Or
Okay.
or I'd probably be like a multi-unit that I'd have to build.
That you'd have to build. That one's going to be a little bit harder. So if you were buying a property, and if you're buying in your personal name, remember that they're always going to check you personally. They're going to check your credit. They're going to check your DTI. They're going to check your income, check your debt. They're always going to still do that, right? But factors that they will consider is then looking into, if you have other rentals, once again, your short-term rental, they're going to look at what the income is coming from there. Clearly, there's still debt to that unless you already own that outright. But if you still have a mortgage on it, remember that that's still going to be, that debt there, but ideally you should be making income from that property. So that is going to help you. Now, when you're buying that new property, most banks will take into consideration the income that's going to be coming in from that, especially if the income is going to be higher than that mortgage. If there is that cash flow, that's something that they're going to really like to see. If you were buying it for appreciation, they're not giving you that mortgage. But if you have that cash flow, they are going to be able to consider that. But they're going to want to see, especially with the current economic environment, they're going to want to see what those rents are. So if you had said to me, Nore, that you were buying a place with tenants in place that had leases, and you could take those leases and give them to the underwriter, the mortgage broker, and that would help you a lot more. If you're going to be building a property and then saying, hey, when it's done in 2022, then the rents are going to be X, I can rent it out for this amount of money and this amount of money. that's a little bit of a speculation for underwriter to really kind of agree to. Plus,
Yeah.
like we talked about in the presentation, construction always takes longer. It always goes over budget, right? So that's already going to be something that they're going to be considering. But now you're going to be saying like, this is the rents I'm going to be getting. Unfortunately, with just our world getting flipped upside down, banks are not so willing to be like, you know what, you probably can get that amount of rent there, because we have
Yeah.
no idea what's going to be kind of happening. So that's going to be a little bit of a harder sell. You can still look around, but I think you're going to have a problem finding a mortgage broker, an underwriter that's going to accept what may be a possibility in the future. If you had leases on hand, totally different scenario.
Gotcha. And
So,
so
but
they may
that
be a
was
little bit funnier about short-term rentals in general, you think?
short-term rentals in general right now. Actually, this is so funny because I wrote my blog this morning and it was all about short-term rentals, because down here, everybody wants to hear. One of my goals of being down here for this time is I want to pick up a short-term rental. My husband and I already own in the Dominican Republic, but we're looking for another short-term rental right around where we are. And I wrote my entire blog this morning about some of those points of what's kind of coming up, and really people just aren't traveling as much as they really want. So we came down here in December and we found out now that, I mean, we know this for a while, but like they changed the restrictions coming back to America. So
Yeah.
in order to get back to America, now you need a COVID test in that foreign country. So a lot of people are canceling their trips because they're like, I don't want to deal with that. I don't know how to do that. I don't want to get stuck out of the country, that type of thing. And Canada actually made it a little more difficult. So I do think those long distance short-term rentals are probably not going to do as well, probably for another 2-3 years. But but locals, a lot of people, we're going nuts. You want to get out of your house. You want to get out of those four walls that you're sitting around, especially if you were in the northern part of the United States where it's really cold right now. You want to get the hell out of your house. So, but people are really looking for like a long weekend. They want to go to the Airbnb. They're going to go to the mountains. They're going to go to where there's space, maybe
Yeah.
still the beach, and that type of thing. But they really just want to go for like more of a shorter kind of period. So you're not even seeing those like weekly or 2-week kind of stays that you used to see. So
Yeah.
short-term rentals, and honestly, we don't know what's going to happen with COVID right now. So there is, once again, there's a risk with anything. We're investors. Investing in itself means that you're really kind of hedging a bet here. Do I still prefer real estate over investing in stocks? 100%. I feel much more comfortable in this space, right?
Yeah.
I understand homes. I don't understand the stock market for anything. So you should always invest in what you know. And this is still where I'm preferring to put my money. I bought my most recent duplex I bought in New York in October. And I felt very comfortable there. I felt very comfortable with the tenants that were in place in the property. But that was still, a risk that like I kind of took. So with the short-term rentals, with where you are in Georgia, it might be a great spot. It might not. That's where you're going to have to do your own due diligence and say, well, okay, this is an area that people are still moving to. You already have the one property there. So you have a little bit of insight into what's kind of going on in that market. So you got to use that information to kind of then make your best guess of what's going to happen next.
Yeah.
So I don't want to dissuade anybody from a short-term rental. There are still great opportunities out there, but just like everything else, you need to know your numbers. You need to know what the economy is doing, because banks are a little bit tighter than they were before on lending. HELOCs are a lot more difficult to come by. Like I said, you can't really do investment mortgages. There used to be some banks that would do a 10 or 15% down for an investment property. You're not seeing those anymore, but interest rates are really low. So you can still take an opportunity with that, but you have to look at the other side of it too, and make sure that you're comfortable with the choice that you're doing and how you're growing your portfolio. Does that help, Nora?
Yeah, thanks.
You're
Thanks a lot.
welcome. Yeah, of course.
Hey, Becky, real fast.
Yeah.
Go into just how you financed or how you found this place in the Dominican Republic.
Sure. So since my husband's from here, I will say that made it a little bit easier. And also there's, for anybody too that went to my YouTube, Live Free with Becky Nova, I have a video there about buying in a foreign country and buying long distance and how to make that work. If you're looking to buy in another country, you have to remember that the United States is not going to give you a mortgage to buy in another country, right? Also, that other country is not going to give you a mortgage if you're an American citizen, right? There's no collateral. They can't hold you to anything. So when you're purchasing in another country, you need to be able to buy in cash unless you are a dual citizen or have citizenship in that country. So we actually lucked out. It was really a goal of my husband's to be able to buy in his home country. That was incredibly important to him. He actually did not want to buy the all fun beach short term rental. He wanted to buy something that would be long-term. that would be something comfortable for, that would be something that really for the citizens that live in the country would be able to use. So we decided to buy that. We bought in the capital, a property there. It was actually new construction. He knew the area. It's close enough to his family that if we need help, we can absolutely do that. We were actually buying a 4-family at that point in time. So we chose to use the mortgage instead of paying cash. Once again, compared New York City versus the Dominican Republic, it's clearly the cheapest of our properties. But our goal, once again, is to stay as liquid as possible because we're still in this acquisition phase of our properties. So we needed the more cash on hand. So we then, for that reason, chose to take the mortgage. We were able to actually close on the quadplex almost a month before we then closed on the property in the Dominican Republic. We got the mortgage out here, and then it made sense to us just based on, there's totally different terms. It's like a 7-year mortgage, they're balloon rates. The interest rate is like 9%. So we went ahead then and then paid that off faster because we'd already closed on the other property and didn't need that cash on hand as much. But the one thing that people need to remember is that if you're buying in a foreign country, you need to have cash ready unless you have citizenship in that country.
Awesome. I love it. Cool. Good. Well, I think it was an amazing presentation. Thank you so much for your insight. You are totally badass.
I thought I was a good fit for this.
Okay, good. So everybody has all your contact information so you guys can get a hold of her if you have any other questions or anything like that. Okay. And thank you so much for coming and hanging out with us. Okay.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thanks, everybody. Enjoy the rest. I'm going to be on for a couple other sessions and things like that. So I'll be around. But thank you so much, Stacey, for putting this all together, and enjoy the rest of your day, everybody.